نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد بسم الله. Today we will be starting Surah Saffat, and Surah Saffat is a Makki surah, 182 ayats and 5 ruku. And the name Saffat means the aligners, since the surah begins with an oath on angels who line up in the heavens like rows of people in prayers. So that's where the name comes from. And what is the connection of this surah with the previous surah? So Surah Safat elaborates on the condition of past nations whose destruction is mentioned in Surah Yasin. In this particular verse, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. So there's a reference here of past nations, and then in Surah Safat there are more detailed examples of some of those nations. Another connection is that Surah Safat describes the state of believers and disbelievers in this world and in the hereafter in much more detail than what is alluded to in Surah Yasin. So again, there's a reference to Surah Yasin, but in this surah there is more details provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a brief synopsis of the surah. The surah mentions three unseen topics: the angels, the jinns, and the resurrection. So there are numerous ayats in the surah about these three unseen entities. And then it begins with the description of angels who line up in preparation of executing orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the surah clarifies the misconception of disbelievers about any kinship, any relationship between jinns and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then it informs us of the resurrection that will happen via a single cry, a single shout that will gather people in the hereafter. Surah Safat also describes the horrible treatment of disbelievers on the Day of Judgment. And then it elaborates the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Yunus alayhi salam in particular, and then it also has references to many other prophets and their nations like Nuh alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Harun alayhi salam, Ilyas alayhi salam, and Lut alayhi salam. A virtue of this surah is mentioned in one of the narrations in Nasai by Abdullah bin Umar anhu, that كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يأمر بالتخفيف ويأمنا بالصافات. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to enjoin upon us to make the prayer short, but he would lead us in prayer and recite As-Saffat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصافات صفا, by those angels lined up in rows. So the surah begins with three oaths, and most of the scholars believe that these oaths are related to angels. The first oath is on angels who stand in rows. And these angels are either always standing in rows, just waiting to execute the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they might be aligning themselves to stand in rows at the time of worship, and Allah knows best. When we look at a hadith, we find that there is a parallel drawn between the standing of angels in rows and those of believers who also stand in rows during the congregational prayers. It's narrated by Hudayfa radhiyallahu anhu in Muslim. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, فضلنا على الناس بثلاث جعلت صفوفنا كصفوف الملائكة وجعلت لنا الأرض كلها مسجدا وجعلت تربتها لنا طهورا إذا لم نجد الماء. We have been favored in three ways. Our prayer rows have been made like the rows of the angels. The entire earth has been made a place of prayer for us, and its soil is purifying for ablution if one cannot find water. And then in another narration narrated by Jabir bin Samurah, in Sunan Abi Dawud, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, ألا تصفون كما تصف الملائكة عند ربهم جل وعز قلنا وكيف تصف الملائكة عند ربهم قال يتمون الصفوف المقدمة ويتراصون في الصف. Will you not form rows as the angels form rows before their Lord? So Sahaba asked, how do the angels form rows before their Lord? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, they complete the first row and fill the gaps in their rows. And we know this is the instruction given to us when we are making our Jamaat, that we should be filling rows ahead of us and also the gaps between people. فَالزَّاجِرَاتِ زَجْرًا, and those who drive the clouds. The second oath is on the angels who drive the clouds. فَالتَّالِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا, and those who recite the message. So this is the third oath, and it is on angels who recite the dhikr or remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that could be one reference here. Another reference could be that it is about angels who bring the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to prophets. Inna ilahakum lawahid, indeed your God is one. So after the three oaths, the Jawab al-Qasam comes. The response to the oath comes. Indeed your Lord is one. So this is the key message for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preceded three oaths to emphasize the importance of Tawheed. And before we go on further into other verses, let's address three questions that may come to mind for someone reading these verses and thinking why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken these oaths. Like, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even need to take an oath? So scholars explain that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need to take the help of an oath to substantiate His word. But this is done perhaps in keeping with the common practice among humans that whenever we want to emphasize the truth of a statement, we take oath. And that's a way for us to make someone else believe what we are saying is true. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also taken oaths more in line with how humans behave, so that we understand when He takes oath on something that He is emphasizing the importance of that particular thing. So that's one question that you may have in mind. Another question would be, when you take an oath upon something, it is generally more great and more sacred than yourself. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath on anything, how is that even possible? Simply because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest. And again, one of the ways to understand it is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath on a creation, He's actually taking an oath indirectly upon His own power to create something, an object of value or respect. So it is an indirect reference to His own power. And then the third question that may arise is, we know in the Islamic Sharia, a person cannot swear by anything except Allah. Then how is it acceptable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take an oath on something else? And again, the answer lies in comparing oneself to the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inappropriate. There is no analogy or equality between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His creation. So the divine prohibition to swear by something or someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala applies to us, but does not apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. He can take an oath on anything He wishes. So with that in mind, let's continue with the rest of the verses. The next 6 verses are focused on the Tawheed, the concept of Tawheed and the proof of Tawheed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما ورب المشارق Lord of the heavens and the earth and that between them, and Lord of the sunrises. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has created everything from the heavens to the earth. And this verse also says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord of the sunrises. So naturally, one would think, why does the verse mention sunrises in plural? Sunrise happens from one place and then sunsets in the other part of the world. So why is this used in a plural form? Scholars explain that since the sun rises from a slightly different point in the east every day of the year. So if you notice, as the season changes, the point of rising of the sun also changes. So there are indeed multiple points of sunrises, and that's what is mentioned here as mashariq in the plural sense. And then if you're thinking why there is no mention of the sunset, well, perhaps it is because sunsets are implied. If sun has risen from one part of the world, it will, of course, set on the other part of the world. And another reason could be that there are already verses that are explicit about both sunrise and sunset. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentioned the sunrises. As we know in Surah Ma'arij, verse 40, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِرَبِّ الْمَشَارِقِ وَالْمَغَارِبِ إِنَّا لَقَادِرُونَ. So I swear by the Lord of all sunrises and sunsets that indeed we are able. So if it's already explicitly mentioned somewhere else, then perhaps there was no need to mention it here. إِنَّا زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِزِينَةٍ الْكَوَاكِبِ. Indeed, we have adorned the nearest heaven with an adornment of stars. So as-sama ad-dunya means the nearest sky, the sky of the world. It is also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has decorated the sky with stars. And you may wonder, how come Quran suggests that these stars are in the sky when we know from astronomy that most of these stars are billions of years away? So keep in mind that Quran is not stating that these stars are necessarily situated within the lowest heaven, which is our sky. They could be in the space above the sky, but from the perspective of someone on earth, they appear to be studded in the sky. وَحِفْظًا مِّن كُلِّ شَيْطَانٍ مَارِدٍ. And as a protection against every rebellious devil. So marid means kharijin an at-ta'ah, disobedient, rebellious. لا يسمعون إلى الملأ الأعلى ويقذفون من كل جانب. So they may not listen to the exalted assembly of angels and are pelted from every side. So يقذفون means يرجمون, they are pelted, they are stoned. دحورا ولهم عذاب واصب. Repelled, and for them is a constant punishment. So دحورا means طردا للشياطين عن الاستماع, outcast from listening. And wasib means daimun muji'un, ongoing, everlasting punishment. إِلَّا مَنْ خَطِفَ الْخَطْفَةَ فَأَتْبَعَهُ شِهَابٌ ثَاقِبٌ. Except one who snatches some words by theft, but they are pursued by a burning flame, piercing in brightness. So in these set of verses, we learn another important purpose of stars. In addition to just being the adornment of the sky, they are used as weapons or missiles to punish any devil who tries to eavesdrop the conversation of angels happening in the heavens. So devils are prevented to hear the communication among angels by stoning them away. But then if a devil is successful in catching some of this information, a shooting star or a meteor chases this devil and destroys it before any knowledge is imparted to the inhabitants of the earth. So by describing this purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indirectly informing us of the falsehood of fortune tellers. These people that claim to know the future, they do not receive any divine knowledge. and they're not predicting future based on any truth. And we also get the understanding in these set of verses that whatever revelation was sent to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that message has been kept pure and in its original state. So no devil could interfere with that message coming from angels down to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So it was not tampered with. And we also understand, it becomes evident to us, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam does not convey to people what he hears from soothsayers or from fortune tellers. And this used to be one of the claims of the mushrikeen, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam hears this from fortune tellers or historians, and then he's simply passing this information onwards, pretending to be coming from himself. So when we learn about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put measures and mechanisms to protect this revelation coming from him to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it becomes clear that the message of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is genuine, and the information that he is imparting is directly coming to him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through angels. Let's review verses 1 to 10. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes oath on his creation, but we are only allowed to take an oath by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the duties of angels include standing in rows, driving the clouds, and reciting the remembrance. And then stars have multiple benefits, one of them being the adornment of the sky, and then also being weapon or missiles against devils. فاستفتهم أهم أشد خلقا أم من خلقنا إنا خلقناهم من طين لازب. Then inquire of them, O Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, are they a stronger or more difficult creation, or those others we have created? Indeed, we created men from sticky clay. So lazib means lazijan, yaltasiqu ba'duhu bi ba'din, sticky substance. And this verse addresses the belief of resurrection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a rational proof to disbelievers who, on one hand, acknowledge that the heavens and the earth were created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but on the other hand, they denied his power to resurrect human beings again in the hereafter. So it was visually obvious to disbelievers that the skies, the stars, mountains, oceans, and many other creations, all of them were much bigger than their own size. And then here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compares that creation with the creation of man, with an argument saying, look, man is weak, and yet you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already created all these other heavenly bodies. And we also learned that from Surah Ghafir, verse 57, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَخَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَكْبَرُ مِنْ خَلْقِ النَّاسِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. The creation of the heavens and the earth is greater than the creation of mankind, but most of the people do not know. If you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create such a grand universe, then what is so difficult in believing that he can recreate humans again in the hereafter? So that's the message in the verse. And then towards the end of the verse, there's also a reminder of our very humble origins, that Adam alayhi salam was created from a substance which was as simple and basic as the sticky clay. So again, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could create the first human without any mold or precursor, then why can he not recreate the rest of the mankind again, even when their bodies and bones would have disintegrated into dust? بل عجبت ويسخرون وإذا ذكروا لا يذكرون وإذا رأوا آية يستسخرون وقالوا إن هذا إلا سحر مبين أإذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أإنا لمبعوثون أَوَآبَاؤُنَا الْأَوَّلُونَ. But you wonder while they mock, and when they are reminded, they remember not. And when they see a sign, they ridicule and say, "This is not but obvious magic." Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in these verses is projected as someone who wondered what will make these people believe, because when they are reminded of the hereafter, they are so stubborn in their disbelief that even after seeing clear signs and miracles, they continue to deny the prophethood of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And they not only reject the signs, but they go one step further in ridiculing and mocking them. And when they're astounded by a clear sign and they have no other reason to reject it, they start referring to the miracles of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as magic. And we know one example of this behavior was when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam split the moon in two clear portions. And it was so obvious to people in the crowd, as well as reports that came afterwards, that it indeed split into two. People claimed it to be magic. Narrated by Jubair bin Mut'im in Tirmidhi, he says that the moon was split in the lifetime of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam until it became two separate pieces over this mountain and this mountain. They said, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has cast a spell on us. So even when they saw a clear sign, instead of believing the message and using this as a reason for them to accept the truth, they went in another direction and started calling it magic. قُلْ نَعَمْ وَأَنْتُمْ دَاخِرُونَ فَإِنَّمَا هِيَ زَجْرَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ فَإِذَا هُمْ يُنظَرُونَ وقالوا يا ويلنا هذا يوم الدين هذا يوم الفصل الذي كنتم به تكذبون. Say yes, and you will be rendered contemptible. So dakhirun means saghirun, adillah, humiliated. And then it will be only one shout, and at once they will be observing. So zajra means nafkha, shout or call. They will say, "Oh, woe to us, this is the day of recompense." They will be told, "This is the day of judgment, which you used to deny." So disbelievers will realize in the day of judgment that we were rejecting it, but it was real. And then they will regret not believing and preparing for this day, but then there is no recourse at that point. Let's review verses 11 to 21. Creation of the heavens and the earth is more complex than that of man. And the origin of man was merely a mass of sticky clay when Adam a.s. was created. And human beings will surely be resurrected upon a single cry. Any regret on the day of judgment will be of no avail. We'll stop here, inshallah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم.